Hello and welcome to the Christmas edition of Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis.
Jingle, jingle. Except, like, thematic jingles, because it's all Christmas.
Yeah. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride on a 2 reindeer, 1 dwarf and 1 allegory for Satan sleigh.
And, like, do a light bit of attempted child murder.
We do love a light bit of attempted child murder on this podcast. That is, and obviously the biggest danger, we must start the podcast with this. It's paramount. C.S. Lewis made it very clear. The most dangerous possible child murderer with the most child murders to their name is just wardrobes. Wardrobes, the silent killers.
Never ever lock yourself in a wardrobe.
I mean,
It's 5 times I counted after the first 2. Well, only very stupid children close themselves in wardrobes. You would never do that, would you, reader? I started counting. There's 5 full do not close yourself in a wardrobe
Like,
moments.
he had that. You know that happened to him as a child or something, right? Like, it must have. Or someone he knew.
This is one of those books where I don't think we actually need to introduce the book, because I feel that most people know it, have read it. Kids go through magic wardrobe, see Allegory for Jesus.
Magic Lion Jesus.
Magic war with Jesus, come back through wardrobe, the end.
I was reading Wikipedia, and apparently when asked, C.S. Lewis was like, well, it's not so much that it's an allegory as this is a talking animal AU of the Bible.
Yeah.
Because he was very like, well, God must exist out in the multiverse, and presumably, like, redemption happened for other people, but it just would have gone differently, as appropriate to the differences in their universe. So this is Bible fanfiction, talking animal AU. Don't mind my OCs.
Given that, like, the Out of the Silent Planet and, like, his space trilogy is basically, like, space AU for Christianity, it kind of tracks.
Yeah.
Guys, we need to do our terrible summaries.
I mean, I feel like Em just did one, right?
I did have a set of AO3 tags, but I think that is basically it.
Yeah, I you know what? I think I kind of want to say I don't feel Edmund clearly is an asshole to his siblings, but working out that they are enchanted Turkish Delight.
Yeah,
I have a tiny bit more sympathy for the child. That is
everybody's
my
like
terrible summary.
The received wisdom.
Like, she roofied him, you know? She fully roofied him with, like, magic food.
Yeah.
And the whole, everybody, like, we love to joke about the whole, I'd sell you to Satan for 1 Turkish delight or whatever. But, like, and the whole, people talking about how rationing in World War II, like, you probably would have killed people for sugar, actually. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
But it's fucking magic sugar that you uncontrollably cannot stop eating until it actually kills you. Is just a fun little detail that the narrator throws in there just to...
Like, I get the point he's trying to make about, like, oh, Edmund had started to be swayed by evil and, like, he was bullying kids at school and stuff. But also, magic roofies.
See, I don't know, it was interesting because I kind of was looking at this, because I kind of went in forgetting that I hadn't remembered that the Turkish Delight was actually enchanted. And I was kind of curious to see, like, what else Edmund had going on other than just wanted some sweets, actually. And I was kind of interested by the whole, like, there is still very clearly things that he does that are unpleasant, that are totally unrelated to an eternal desire for evil Turkish delight.
Yeah, like, he lies about having gone to Narnia with Lucy.
Which actually makes him less likely to get more Turkish delight, because if the others don't believe that the magical land exists, how is he supposed to get them there?
Yeah, he just does it to be a little shit.
Yeah.
You know?
The other thing I wanted to notice, I noticed this time that I thought was quite interesting, was that at the end, after Edmund has, like, helped win the final battle and stuff, Lucy looks at him and goes, oh, it was her old Edmund was back. Edmund before he went to that horrid school.
Yeah, and I'm like, what happened to him at that school, actually?
Well, and, like, there's that beat, and then, like, a couple of pages later, one of the things they are said to do as kings and queens of Narnia is to rescue people from having to go to horrible schools. And I'm just
not even horrible schools, just schools in general, but, like...
Yeah.
It's like, great, just uneducated population. That sounds like a really smart idea, but...
Well, just to casually drop in there that somebody had such an awful time at school that they wanted to abolish it entirely. And that's just kind of normal. That's not really commented on, that somebody might... Or it's taken as normal that you should hate school so much that this is a good thing to do.
I feel this is like a beat in this book that, like, yeah, obviously you've got the context of, like, these kids are evacuated from London. I assume that they've had, like, aerial bombings in London or one of the other large cities. I think they do come from London, these kids. And so they're going to have trauma associated with that, and it's a shit time. And the kids have clearly they've been shipped off to boarding school. I think, like, having a look on Wikipedia, I think that was something that happened to C.S. Lewis. I don't know if it's something that...
so one of the things that he referenced in terms of being a cause for his phase of pessimism and atheism, along with World War I and the death of his mother. So, the weighting of that is,
but
unclear,
I think, like, also the fact that I know we're going to come back to this in a bit, but there is, I feel, if you had to compare this compared to the Lord of the Rings, right? And I'm comparing to Lord of the Rings because Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings and they, like, knew each other.
They were good friends.
Yeah, they were buddies. Yeah.
This book's written as a narrator, the same as The Hobbit. There's a lot of mentions. Right, where's the quote I wrote down? The narrator says, "This took rather a long time, even if I wrote pages and pages about it, so I will skip on." And
that's, like, specifically about them travelling as well. So it's they walk. And
I just thought, there's a lot of beats in this book where it's kind of, and it is a kid's novel. Like, I don't know, had you guys read this novel as kids? Because I'm trying to think.
Yes.
I think I might have read this as a child, and so it's probably one of those things where, as a child, you don't need to know the horrors of, like, the kid being bullied at, like, if Edmund had a really bad time at school, you don't really want to read about that in a book as a kid. Like, I don't know, it's something that I never picked up on, but as an adult, you pick up on it.
I don't think you need to go into massive detail. One of the things that I really appreciated on this reread was how, like, clear, and also how... I keep coming back to the word efficient, and that's a terrible word to discuss art with, but like...
I feel that's right.
No,
that's
but it's economical with it.
Yeah, there's an economy of phrase. You don't... A lot is given to you in very, like, clear, passing terms that you don't need to labour the point that he'd been to board, he'd hated school, or that school had changed him. We get one line about him being, Peter saying he bullies the younger boys, and then that line at the end about how he didn't used to be as awful, like, he didn't used to be awful, and then he went to school. But you don't need more than that. And there's a lot of other things, like, not to harp on about the wardrobe thing, it's very, it's hilarious how many times he mentions it.
It is,
but it is also mentioned for different characters. And every time Lucy goes into a wardrobe, it's mentioned, don't close the wardrobe, and she doesn't. Peter goes into the wardrobe, doesn't close the door. Edmund does let the door close and doesn't think about it. And it's just like, okay, well, that might mean nothing, but also...
Boy does not care for his own safety.
Or it's just that it's a tiny bit of, like, he's careless, he doesn't think things through, which is kind of, not in keeping with the way he's sort of like, well, I don't really think about the consequences of the White Witch probably isn't really going to kill my siblings. It's probably going to be fine, and it's more important that I'm going to be king and eat lots of Turkish Delight anyway. There's it's not a psychological profile in one line, but it's a little bit of world building, it's a little bit of characterization, and it's all done that way. It's all got this very lucid, clear, saying a lot with a little thing going on that I really, really like. And it's not dissimilar to The Hobbit, I think, in that way. Like, the whole, we talked about it when we did the episode, but the bit at the Battle of Five Armies where it talks about Bilbo's response to the battle and to how many people have died. And it's it's one line, basically.
He went to his tent and he cried for a very long time.
Yeah, he went to a quiet place and he cried for a little time because he was only a little hobbit, and it was... And he, it's I'm not quoting it correctly, but it's very impactful, and it's like one line, and that's it. You get the horrors of war, and it's like, oh, yeah, you've got it now. In like very simple, I'm telling a bedtime story to a child language, but it's so evocative and striking. And I think there's a lot of that in this book, and I really
boiled it down to
appreciated
its
that.
essence.
Yeah, which is what fairy tales do in a way, isn't it? That's like what fairy tales are as a narrative, and what it is as a narrative style is like right down to the core of the core of what it is you're trying to say.
Speaking of like things being evocative, that's one of the things. So I read these when I was a kid at church. So I was raised in the Church of England, and one of the things that my church that I went to as a kid had was sort of stack of books, sort of shelf of books out front in the sort of foyer for kids to read and be entertained by during services so that they weren't rowdy. And, most of them were like really targeted at young children, but they did have the Narnia books. And so I read those and reread those quite a lot. But then I never reread them after I stopped going to church. So I haven't read them for over 15 years at this point. And most of what I remembered were like these really evocative images. Like, so from later on in the series, you've got Reapy Cheap and you've got this book that has the most beautiful story in it, and you forget as soon as you as soon as you close the book. And like, lots of stuff in the Dawn Treader actually in particular. But I had thought that the breaking of the table was later in the series than this. But it's actually
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and it came up because in our household recently we were watching King Arthur Legend of the Sword, which is a banging movie. And there's a stone table that gets broken in there by somebody being stabbed on it. And you mentioned, the breaking of the table. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing in Narnia, isn't it? Is that from something else? And maybe you can tell me now if that's like an Arthurian thing?
If it is, it's not one that's stuck in my head. But it's a very striking image.
Yeah. But I was like, oh yeah, isn't that like a really like powerful moment in the Narnia series? But I thought it would be like in the last battle or something. But it's here.
Yeah.
He does not wait to get in on the Jesus allegory,
But what else did you find? Like, was there stuff that surprised you coming back to it, having like not read it for a while?
How short it was. How fast it moves.
Yeah.
I remember the whole scene in the beaver's house is only like 2 pages, and I remember that being like, but it's still a significant proportion of the book in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, just how quick it is to read, and how much he packs in there.
Yeah.
And how much heavy lifting my imagination was doing as a kid in terms of, I mean, he gives you a lot to work with, like, again, evocative imagery, but I had such a vivid picture of it in my head.
Yeah.
And so much of that is painted with so few words.
Yeah. It was an odd one for me to come back to, because I did read it as a child, and I had that, I think, a relationship with it that I think a lot of people had, where I really loved it on the face of it, and then somebody pointed out that it was actually about Jesus, and
then you went, yuck.
That has twisted my relationship with it over time, because I've been thinking about it, because it's like, it really has like had a massive impact, that, and I was really struggling to like take it on its own terms and not react to it or to kind of feel attacked almost by bits where I noticed, particularly strong, there's a pelican in the scene when they first meet Aslan, or the clearing of the witch's house is clearly the harrowing of hell now. That's a thing that I hadn't noticed before. But it's a very weird thing to have to reconcile, because I realized what it was. I was feeling betrayed by it. I felt like I'd been tricked, and it was coming
like
back.
Somebody had snuck vegetables into your food or something.
Yeah,
but like somebody somebody had tried to sneak it past you.
Yeah, and something that I really loved, and it was very weird coming back to it and realizing that it's how formative it's been. Rereading it now after not having read it for like 15 odd years, how much it has formed how I think about writing and what I value in a story, and just like feeling it take its place in my brain again, right at the root of like, you know, a lot of stuff, and then having to reckon with, just
it's all sort of there's a line in there that made me go, oh wow, and let me find it. It's when they're talking about, is the Queen of Narnia, is the Queen actually the Queen, like where did she come from? I've got it up here. She comes of your father Adam's first wife. They called her Lilith. She was one of the Jinn. That's where she comes from on one side. And on the other, she comes of the giants. No, there isn't a drop of real human blood in the witch. That's why she's bad all through, Mr. Beaver, said Mrs. Beaver. And I'm like, okay. And then they go on to say, like, the only dwarfs they've ever met have been the ones who looked the least human. It's like, I don't like what that says about sort of that it says that there's, you know, there might be two ways you can feel about something that's not human, but there's only one way you can feel about something that pretends to be human. And I'm thinking about stories about like changelings and that probably being like, you know, autistic children and, you know, throughout history being labeled like that. And it sets my teeth on edge a little bit, that stuff. And I'm sure I wouldn't have turned... I don't remember that at all from being a kid because it just passed me straight by and I thought it was fine.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, a lot of people have talked about the kind of like, oh, them being human gives them the right to rule and they're like the special kind of human and it's all a bit, ooh, okay, bud.
Yeah.
But I think to have something I love turn out to be something that I... you know, belonging to a faith that I think by that point I had found to be
not a home for you.
Not a home for me, and also something that had I think made me feel very out of place in the world generally, something that was, you know, patronizing and focused on obedience and but it's different as an adult.
See, I don't know, like, maybe because I read this at very face value. I have absolutely no background in, like, Christian theology. Like, I know the bare basics, the bare bones, you know, the Christmas story, and that's basically the extent of it, and what you learn in RE at school. And so, for me, reading this now, like, obviously I picked up on the Sons of Adam and Daughters of Eve, which I think is the only thing I ever picked up on as a child. I was like, oh, okay. But I don't know, for me, reading it as an adult, the thing that, like, the world building just didn't make any sense. I'm with Tolkien on this one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like, Father Christmas is there, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's my fun question for you guys. Which bit of world building that would make Tolkien want to commit murder is your favourite?
I wanted to commit murder. Like, I was just like, oh my God, Clive, like, what are you doing? Because he's got... Okay, the things that I've written down. I will get my notes out for this. I shall clear my throat for this. Okay, so I've got... we have got, like, okay, so I don't understand why the beavers don't have names. They're just Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. So does this mean that all beavers...
They're the only two, actually? They're the only two that made it off the ark?
Yeah, are the only two beavers that made it off the ark? Or is it like, are all the other beavers also called Mr. and Mrs. Beaver? Like, why do they not have names? I don't understand.
That did bother me also.
Like, also the fact that there's basically mainly like British creatures in this.
Oh,
so
it is
foxes and robins and all these.
It is peak British exceptionalism.
Plus, some random ass dryads and gin and like other things from like he just gone. I'm going to take a little bit this, a little bit that, and then,
here's the answer, Lottie. If they're British, if they're good, and if they're not British, then they're not good.
Yeah, and then just to top it all off, like. It doesn't make any sense that Father Christmas is there. Like it died. Like I'm just deeply confused because
he's like the platonic ideal of Father Christmas. He's the real thing, and we've only got stories. You know?
Like the fact that like I did Google this. Like the whole point of Santa Claus arrived in England in the 1850s from America. And then you've also got like Santa, who was based on St. Nicholas, who's a 4th century Greek bishop, right? And I'm like, okay.
They don't seem to have bishops in Narnia. How does this happen?
I'm just deeply confused because if, like, you know, I just why is Santa there? Like, it doesn't make any and also
that's the title of this episode. Why is Santa there?
Also, the fact that Christmas is in winter. Like, you can tell he wouldn't grow up in Australia.
I feel like we can allow him that.
But he's allowed to not have grown up in the Southern Hemisphere.
I know.
It's not a point against him.
But I feel I don't know, it just felt very like this sort of mishmash, and like Santa turning up was sort of the fact that, like, Santa's here, like Father Christmas here, he's got some gifts. Here you go, children.
Do you know who Santa is? Santa is the equivalent of Galadriel. Like she gives the fellowship gifts that come in handy at, like, you know.
But like Galadriel had like some kind of context. She made sense in the setting, and like rereading this, Father Christmas doesn't make any sense because it's a Christian. It's something that has become like associated with Christmas, but is not part of, as far as I'm aware, in my very limited knowledge of Christian theology, part of Christian theology. Like,
well, here's the other thing. Like, so there's Christmas, right, in Narnia. That's a thing. You know, it's always winter, never Christmas. So Christmas is a thing. Is there like ancient Narnian Roman Empire? Ancient Narnian Bethlehem?
This is what I thought. I thought, like, yeah.
Is there fucking Herod? Like,
killing all the lion cubs in Judea.
Like, does this mean that there is like a
let's dig into this.
There was a pagan festival roughly in wintertime before?
Like, he's not even called Christ in
I
Narnia.
know. So
he's
why
called
is it called Christmas?
Like,
so why do they have Christmas? It doesn't make any sense. If this is meant to be an allegory for like Christian theology, so why is it called Christmas?
That's my answer. That's my answer. Is what would have pissed off Tolkien the most about the world building is he didn't even bother to construct an alternate history and language.
Yeah. And it bothers me. It bothers me greatly.
Scrub.
Because I was thinking, maybe, because the whole, like, how Narnia came to be, which is in the, me trying to remember what the name of the first book is.
The Magician's Nephew.
The Magician's Nephew, yeah, that one. Which is not, like, also the fact that these are not published in, like, reading order. They were published in order and the reading order is, like, completely different. But I'm just trying to say, so that is in the summer of 1900. So 50 years after Santa has the concept of Santa Claus has come from the States to the UK, and I thought, maybe like the reason it's all British is because like the first King of Narnia is from Britain or some shit like that, and it just isn't.
It's because Britain is the one true culture. And everything that isn't British is either inferior and needs to be educated, or ultimately derived from us, like America, right? That's the paradigm within which C.S. Lewis kind of lives.
I mean, I will throw in there for you the fact that he was born in Ireland and considered himself to be Irish, so his perspective on Britain is possibly slightly more nuanced.
This is such a deeply English book, though, to me at least. Like, it reads like, I don't know, maybe that's just my bias of like, I assume that the author must have been English, but he wasn't. Yeah.
Well, maybe it's more that we should think about it more as being like an Inkling style or a fantasy authors from that era of Oxford style, rather than or just this is, you know, it's very specifically a bedtime story for children, and that has informed the world and the language and what's available to them. Now,
the thing is like, okay, just taking on that point, Em, you say about the children's story, and I think that's such a, like, I feel The Hobbit is a great one to compare it to. And I think you've also mentioned this in the notes. Like, The Hobbit is a fantasy children's book. This is a fantasy children's book, but they're very different in their style. Like, as you mentioned with like Bilbo, when the battle happens, like the battle's not mentioned on page, but the implication is still there. And I feel with The Hobbit there is this like, you get the idea that it's a children's story, but it's still fantasy, and it's still, again, because Tolkien had the backstory.
Their relationships to this world in universe are very different as well, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, this is, you know, classic Portal fantasy as opposed to...
But I think, like, I guess, like, the Portal fantasy versus, like, air quote, not real fantasy, but, like, fake world fantasy, I guess is the... But even, like, the narration of it, I feel the narrator talks to the reader a lot more, like, breaks the fourth wall a lot more than in The Hobbit.
That happens more than you think in The Hobbit.
Is reading it as if it's a fantasy book being read to a child.
The narrator in The Hobbit does do quite a lot of talking directly to the reader. I'm thinking of like when Bilbo's like and pissing off the spiders, for example, and like and there's sort of there's various bits and pieces like when we reread it, you know, a couple seasons ago, because I had that in my head as well, that it was less than in Narnia, but actually I do think they're very similar.
Well, and I think they do different. It's a similar vibe, and often sometimes it's doing similar things in terms of like maybe reassuring a child reader or explaining something in different terms, or just saying, well, this will be, you know, this is a surprise tool that will help us later, but in a, you know, old timey Tolkien/Lewis sort of way. One of the things that really struck me about this that I think is less of a thing in The Hobbit is that very often one of the main things that the narrator is doing is talking to the child about their feelings, or trying to draw the child in by saying, you know that feeling when?
Yes, like, I hope you know what I mean when I say that his voice sounded pale, or...
or the...
the way that they feel about Aslan, or...
Yeah, or I hope you have never felt as sad as Lucy and Susan did that night, but if you have, you know that, you know, you'll cry yourself out, and then there'll be this period of quiet. And I think that's quite a striking difference from The Hobbit, because I think we talked about it in the episode, but like The Hobbit, a lot of how people are feeling about things is very much in the spaces of the narration, and there's not, I don't think, a lot of sort of deep dives on either how a particular feeling feels, or how a particular feeling in a particular circumstance might feel, or kind of, just digging into the feeling a bit and drawing it parallel to the audience, the child that's listening to these stories, like life experience, which I think was really interesting, and it was something that I thought really worked, honestly, in this book. And but it is an interesting difference, because I think both of them do emotion and characterization very, very well, and in quite similar ways. But that was the biggest difference, I think, that struck me.
I have been having a little Google in the background, and I will share the link with you for the reference post. But I found this article where it's referencing about why he's talking about not shutting yourselves in the wardrobe. And apparently, so it's dedicated to this book. It's dedicated to Lucy Barfield, who is the daughter of Owen and Maud. And in the letters between Lewis and C.S. Lewis and Maud objected to the children wearing fur coats, as it seemed an endorsement of the fur trade. 2, she objected to the danger of children being shut inside a wardrobe. And then he said he wrote a second letter to Maud on June 4th in which he promised to add a warning to children to not shut themselves in a wardrobe.
Okay.
But he does also have Lucy loving fur coats.
Yeah, so
So this is really fitting with another bit that I wanted to talk about, which is that C.S. Lewis's sense of humour, or the narrator's sense of humour in this. Because, okay, there is so much trolling in this book. So the whole, he said, I solemnly swear I will put a warning about not dying in wardrobes in. He puts 5 in. He is labouring the point. What's it? The meme from the adaptation, the do not cite the deep magic to me witch. Yeah. Well, in the book, in the text, the witch is like, don't you remember the deep magic? And the witch is like, and Aslan's like, let us pretend I have no idea what the deep magic is. Very gravely, do tell me what the deep magic is. And the witch loses her shit because she can tell he's taking the piss out of her. He is trolling. He's like, oh, I've never heard of the deep magic. I know nothing. I'm definitely not magical lion Jesus. Why don't you, Satan, explain the deep magic to me?
I'm definitely not about to pull a neat little trick on you because you don't know the really deep magic.
Yeah. And the lamppost. The lamppost being specifically Tolkien saying no good fantasy story would have a lamppost in it. And Lewis going,
C.S. Lewis being like, hold my beer. Yeah.
but what's amazing,
he's a fucking troll, and I love it.
Is the fact that because The Magician's Nephew, which explains how the lamppost got there, is published like 4 or 5 years after this book.
It's just there
means
for
that
no
he
reason.
had to then basically backwork it into the narrative.
Oh yeah.
Which is something that just like makes me chuckle.
Which also feel could be another dig at Tolkien in the kind of like, see, I've created a whole backstory that makes the lamppost make sense.
I've justified
This is my Silmarillion.
Yeah, right here. It's a kid's novel.
Oh, also, speaking of the sense of humour, sorry, my other favourite thing that I noticed about this, which is that you have a chapter called Deep Magic from the Dawn of Time, and then 2 chapters later it says Deeper Magic from Beyond the Dawn of Time. And there's just something so funny about that juxtaposition to me. I really enjoyed that.
It is good. I kind of want to do our fun question, because I feel it would be a fun discussion, and I want to give full time for it. Which is, who is the Muppet? Who is the only human in the Muppets adaptation of this book?
See, here we have a problem.
Yeah,
we have a problem,
right, 'cause they're all
here.
animals.
And it's very, very plot important that the Pevensies are human.
So one of them's got to be a human and the others have to be Muppets.
Edmund is the only human.
I think
CGI
it's funnier
animals.
if we're just told that they're humans, but they're Muppets.
I tell
And
you what,
everyone's like,
Actually,
oh my
yeah,
god, they're
that
humans.
Would be funnier. That would be funnier.
Because
Yeah.
my boring answer is the White Witch. Because she's sort of in a class of her own, but and isn't Aslan.
also, it does make the whole she's not got a drop of human blood in her quite funny.
Oh, do you
It
know
does.
who I think would be a cute answer is the Professor?
Oh, yeah,
Cedric.
I could see that. Yeah.
Diggory. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Diz.
No, Diggory. What's his surname?
Diggory Kirk, I think.
Yeah, it's Diggory, isn't it? The Professor
We've been-
Diggory.
we've been-
Not Cedric Diggory. That is
No.
a different
That's a
children's
different guy.
book with many problems.
That is a different.
Yes.
That is the Boy Wizard trilogy we do not discuss.
Yeah, my bad.
God, if
my
only
bad,
it was
guys.
only a trilogy.
It-
Anyway.
But
But
yes.
yeah, no, that I do think that's funny. I do think the other thing that would be quite funny is if everybody in the Pevensies world, our world, is a Muppet, and then they're Muppets, and then all of the animals are the most realistic CGI you can possibly
Yes.
like. That is
Yep.
quite entertaining to me. I feel like the Muppets is, if you were going to pick a fairly like an iconic adaptation style, I don't know that the Muppets is the one I would pick. But
So
then
what else would you do if you had to do another adaptation style?
well, that's it, isn't it?
I mean, I'd do a Studio Ghibli of this, right? Studio Ghibli would be my call.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this for Tolkien, right? Like,
Well, I was thinking, I mean, this is another one where I think the Song of the Sea or Book of Secret of Kells style animation would be quite fun. I'd also trust the guys who did How to Train Your Dragon.
Yes.
I feel like there's something about the bit where the sequence where they're riding Aslan across Narnia to
yeah.
like free everybody from the White Witch's house that feels very like the way listening to the flight music from How to Train
Yes,
Your
Test
Dragon
Drive.
feels.
Yeah.
Like it's that similar. I'll show you what. That's another thing that really actually surprised me on a reread was how joyful this book is, and how joyful it is in the bits that are, in some ways, the bits that are the most Christian. But like, you know, the White Witch thinks that having a party and enjoying food is like self-indulgent and greedy and terrible, and Father Christmas bringing you delicious tea to have with your breakfast, and like. Is this wonderful happenstance that everybody celebrates, and good food is celebrated and good company is celebrated.
The world would be a much brighter place if people valued home and cheer and food.
yeah,
right?
yeah, and the sheer joy in the landscape and being outdoors and spring, the delight of spring, and just like and the way the freeing everybody from the statues is described is this really like. It's a party. Everybody's having a wonderful time running all over this house in this like joyous cavalcade, just having an absolute ball. And I don't know. That is not Christianity to me, but I love that that's something that's what it was to him, you know? That's kind of beautiful to me. Sorry, that went way more serious than Who Would Be the Human in the Muppets adaptation. Not to get serious literary criticism about this for a second.
We do serious literary criticism on this podcast. That's
we are very serious.
It's a very serious book podcast.
Very serious book. Okay, because we're talking about adaptations, and like I think, what is your favourite adaptation? Like, I love the film. I remember watching it in the cinema. I mainly love the film soundtrack. Like, it's very much a Christmas film in my head. Like, I don't know why. I think it's just that the soundtrack just gives Christmas vibes.
Well, and also, like,
even though most of it is not set in winter, but you know,
Christmas is kind of the pivot point of it, though, isn't it? Christmas is the bit that it hinges on.
And this is our Christmas episode.
It is.
I know. I think if Home Alone is a Christmas movie, then this is also a Christmas movie.
It's interesting because it's a Christmas thing, but the bit of Christianity that Aslan is doing, right, is Easter.
Yeah.
Is that he dies for our sins and comes back. So it's a little confused in that way, I want to say.
Well, see, I don't know. Like I said, I think it does, a lot of the inconsistencies make more sense to me if you don't look at it as straight allegory, but you look at it as, the talking animals AU of the Bible. And it's doing what a lot of very good AU fan fictions do, is looking at the source material and going, okay, if we'd fundamentally changed a bunch of this shit, if this was, a story for children and it was set in a world full of talking animals and magic, how would it look different? How would, how would it, and some of that is to do with it being a fairy tale. So like things like the condensing of the timeline, and Christmas and Easter aren't that far apart. And in terms of
that's fair.
It's been an eternal winter and now we are very much, we speed run spring in a day. So having
That's
Easter
true.
come up that doesn't particularly bother me. The fact that it's one day, the fact that the original sin is not something, it's not some inherited lack of grace. It's not some inherited taint from the original human beings.
Although there is a lot of sexism in this book.
That is fair. However,
the way that he treats the girls completely differently, Aslan treats the girls completely differently to the boys.
Yeah, but that is not. I will say that is not at all associated with the idea of original sin. And where I was, we can come back to this, but where I was going with it was that I do actually prefer this take on what constitutes having, sinned against the deep magic or whatever, is that it's specifically traitors. Now, we can argue about the concept of a traitor and whatever, but it's about something that Edmund has specifically done.
Yes.
He has sold his family out to the White Witch for sweets, and power, and for being a selfish little shit who doesn't think about consequences, and there are consequences. Here are the consequences. That is very much not how original sin is generally treated in the church.
It's that we're intrinsically flawed, and we would all be absolutely fucked if not for Jesus.
It's actually impossible. It's impossible for us to live a blameless life. It is impossible, and it's only through the grace of God and through the redemption of through Christ's resurrection that we have any chance at all of being good. That is not how it works.
Which,
here.
honestly, it's a bit like, if that's true, then, like, enormous skill issue on God's part in making us. Like, you fucked up.
Yeah.
We shouldn't all come off the factory line broken, Anyway,
I think you could very much argue that this is Pelagianism, and that it's like, it is possible to lead a blameless life. All you have to do is not sell your siblings out for sweets.
But I think also, I just made a point, like, none of these kids watch the Stranger Danger videos. Like, I feel
they didn't exist yet.
I know they didn't exist. I know they didn't exist. But I feel that, like, the fact that, Edmund makes a point, because at the end of the day, he's not even, is he 10? I assume he's gone to boarding school, so let's say at most 11. Like, he's gone into this magical wardrobe. He's then found like the only adult that he's come past who's seemingly nice to him, and he's like, oh well, he's had a positive interaction, then has some magic sweets, and then like Lucy is just he's blindly believing the White Witch, and Lucy's blindly believing
Well, she
the
does try to be
beavers.
like, no, I don't think I should go to your house for sweets. Like, I've got shit to be doing.
But what I mean is like that it kind of goes, oh well, the White Witch is bad, but it's like, again, it's a children's story, so you're not going to go into like, okay, are you going to be able to take like two sides of the argument and find out the middle? It's just be like, people are good or bad.
I don't think it's as unreasonable as the story paints it for Edmund and Lucy to react the way they do with the people that they're given.
Like, I think, and the fact that Edmund's given magic Turkish Delight, the fact that they are enchanted, the fact that the reason he keeps asking for it is because they're enchanted. That's all he wants. And I assume until Aslan turns up, like that is still there. All he can think about is Turkish Delight, and so he's basically been magically brainwashed to sell his siblings out to the only adult who's been positive to him in that world. I don't know, like, it's not great that he sold his out, but does he know, I don't know, does he know that, like, what he's done is inherently bad because he's just met some random woman, ate a sweet and then left and said, I've got some siblings.
Sorry, there is a bit where the narrator says, deep down he knew the witch was evil.
Yeah,
and this is
and that comes up multiple times.
Okay, maybe on my speed listen, I my speed
he
does
on
2 times speed.
But this is kind of why it was really interesting to me on a reread, because I think it's a lot more nuanced than people tend to let it be. In that, like
one of his sins is lying to himself.
Like, he's very much in denial about. He knows he doesn't. He's more interested in, the sweets and having power and petty. He's made everything that happens to him is somebody else's fault, which is a very, it's very true to life. That is a way that, like, people think. It feels very real to me, but it's also more it's more nuanced than both. He sold his siblings out for sweets, and it's more nuanced than, it's not his fault because the sweets are magic. Like we said, there's a lot he does that is not at all influenced by the desire for sweets.
There's the fact that when they go back through the wardrobe, that he says, "Oh no, we were playing. We were making it up," and it's like that is just cruel. Like, you've been there. Your little sister knows you've been there, but you're rather than also saying, "Oh yes, I also went to this magical place. I too am." Not going cuckoo, but everyone thinks Lucy's like, oh god, is she all right because she's made this place up, rather than going along with Lucy. He's like, well, I want to save face and say, oh no, we made it up. Lucy.
Well, it's not even saving face, because if he corroborated it, he wouldn't look bad, or he wouldn't look any worse than the other two who didn't believe her. It's not just to save face, it's to gain clout over her.
He wants to gain clout.
He's been being mean about it. That's the thing, is that the other two have been like, okay, we'll let this go. And he's the one that has constantly been bullying her about it. So I don't know. Like I said, I think there's a lot of room for, like, interpretation on, like, how he's behaving and why he's doing what he's doing. But I just think it's interesting how nuanced it is and how much stuff is going on. But you're right. I do think it's also quite interesting that we are expected to go, oh well, Tumnus is fine, but
it's really creepy. Actually,
but like the thing is that the only thing we have that's different, really, you're right, in the initial encounter is that the vibes are rancid. Oh, and she's a little bit rude to him. She's quite rude to him, I think. Like, she calls him it, and, like, we asks what he is in a very peremptory fashion, and is, like, she's not particularly polite or friendly, I think. But then again, it's a fairy story, and small details are doing a lot of work, so... Yeah,
and I think that's maybe, like, when you read it as an adult, that I don't know... You try and read into it more, maybe because in adult literature you are given a lot of the time you are given the explanations to all the setup. So it's not in the same way that like. Or I guess, like, now if you have, like, spooky castle, you go, oh shit, it's about to go down.
Speaking of spooky castle. Sorry, no, go on, finish.
As an adult, you kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, what's the context? Like, how have they not picked up on this nuance? But as a child, like, the child doesn't know that.
And even if they do, they don't always have the language to articulate it or the confidence in themselves to believe it.
And that's the whole issue with the whole stranger danger thing was don't trust random adults, is because kids would trust random adults. That, like, you know, if you've got like somebody just palming sweets out the back of a van, a la stranger danger videos, you know, you have to tell kids to don't automatically trust all adults. Like, I don't know. And then going into that, like, you know, Edmund's automatically trusting the only adult he's met who looks vaguely human versus Lucy meeting a fawn.
Someone who's visibly not.
Yeah. Like, no, well, I guess it's not a human, but like if they've only met like adult humans in their life, Edmund's just going, okay, this is an adult. Are they trustworthy? Maybe, I don't know, but you know, they're an adult humans. They probably they might have their shit together. I don't know.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I wasn't expecting to reread it and find it to be as nuanced.
I agree. Such a short book as well.
Yeah.
You know?
The other thing, going back to adaptations and whether these children are being brats, I do I think every adaptation I've ever seen has done Peter so dirty. Because, like, he's
a bit of a bitch.
But he is a bit of an arsehole.
Is he?
Not as much, but not as much Edmund.
Like, I genuinely don't think he is in the book. I think he's very reasonable about most things. He's like, he takes what I think is a very mature stance on, like, what Lucy's deal is. He's like, okay, well, this isn't anything we can solve. I don't believe her. It's weird that she's telling the truth, that she insists she's telling the truth. But I'm going to let it go because I don't, you know, it's not hurting anybody. It's not important. And when it seems like it is going to cause a problem, he goes to a responsible adult and is like,
yeah,
hey, what do we do about this? He's like, he says he is mean to Edmund exactly once about the fact that he lied. He calls him a beast once. And then they let that gets let go. He's very like, we should, you know, when he finds out that Edmund's gone, he's immediately like, we should go rescue him. I don't know, man. I was pleasantly surprised.
You know what? I retract my earlier snark.
Yeah, I retract my statement.
Just genuinely, I was pleasantly surprised.
I feel like he definitely gives like elder sibling energy, like kind of everyone. Yeah. I know all. Not I know all, but like just sort of the leader.
But I think he's got take charge. He's got take charge energy. He is very much
take charge energy. That's
I'm
exactly,
the responsible one. But also he doesn't do anything to, like, counter that impression. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing he does that actually contradicts that view of himself, if indeed it's one he holds, rather than it just being, you know, something that he does, you know, as part of his character inherently. Speaking of characters that I was surprised by, I enjoyed Susan's rules lawyering about coat theft.
Yeah,
she's like, well, technically, we're not actually taking them out of the wardrobe because the whole country is in the wardrobe.
12-year-old, you know, yeah. That is like, yeah.
She's also pretty. I think she does pretty well in this book. I think she's like both reasonable and sufficiently like excited by and interested in adventure. I don't know. I thought it was, it was good. Also, thinking about adaptations, The woman that plays Susan in the most recent one,
Anna Popplewell,
she's so beautiful. What the hell? My tiny like baby homosexual brain was like, why do I think Susan in this film is so cool? I really would have expected to be more like, you know, I was more of a Lucy or an Edmund fan, and I'm sitting here like, Susan's the coolest. Susan's so cool. What the hell? Nah.
I will say I had a massive crush on the guy who played Edmund when I was like 11.
One of my best friends also really, really into that guy. Yeah,
like I don't know what I was just like.
They're formative. They're formative films. It turns out.
Yeah, I know they're formative films.
Which Narnia kid did you have a crush on as a tiny 11-year-old? Is that's serious shit.
Pass. I don't think I did.
Fair enough.
Actually, no. In Prince Caspian, I had Ben Barnes in it, so like that's probably.
I must admit, I didn't really get the Ben Barnes thing. I can kind of see it. I don't know. Maybe it was just the character specifically in Caspian I wasn't that into. I don't know, but yeah.
I don't know, like 12-year-old me thought he had a nice face, but
It is a good face. I will allow this. I've seen it in things I enjoyed better, but that's
just yeah.
But yeah, I used to watch my grandparents had the BBC, like the 80s, early 90s version. So that's my iconic adaptation. It's been ages since I saw it, but I remember being very spooked by the White Witch's army. I think the CGI or the animation probably wouldn't stand up now, but at the time, that was some nightmare shit that was happening there.
I haven't seen the BBC adaptation. I think I've only seen the film version. I'm trying to think. I mean,
oh, that was the other thing I was thinking about the new one. Actually, not only did it do Peter dirty, I think the other thing that was really interesting is that we also, like with The Hobbit, the book, you don't get the battle really.
No, like, you don't. It's just like the battle.
They come upon it, they finish it off very quickly. And Peter comes back and tells us, that Edmund did this really cool thing. And Aslan kills the witch.
He's not nearly freaked out enough about the fact that his brother might be dying. Can I just point out?
Also,
maybe he's in shock. Maybe he remembers that Lucy has the magic healing stuff, but,
Also, like, the girls are not in the battle for... And the reason is, I quote, battles are ugly when women fight.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Susan's given a bow and arrow and has to do the square root of Ethel with it. Like,
she doesn't end up shooting the wolf, does she? She doesn't use the bow and arrow in this one.
So, like, it's kind of, I mean, yeah, I don't know, but, in the film, like, that's got a very good piece of music. I love that piece of music. It's a very good 7 minutes piece of music. 7.5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, reading it now as an adult, I kind of assumed that the battles are ugly when women fight was a very abstract way of saying that women on battlefields
fight dirty.
Well, no, not so much. I think they're in a different kind of danger in that. I don't know. That's how it read to me now, as more of a like.
I kind of
we assume that women captured on the who were wounded or captured on the battlefield are more likely to be raped than men are. Was like a very, very wide way around that.
I kind of thought it was like if it's got to the point where the women are fighting,
that's more how I took it.
If all the men are dead by that point because we've conscripted all the men and we've resorted
to... that's a good point. Yeah, it's the Eowyn thing of like you will have leave to die in the house, but the kind of that's not as dishonourable as she seems to think because there's plenty that's worth protecting. If she's got to fight, it's because she's fighting for the kids and the elderly. Yeah, and it's the very last stand. Yeah,
and that's what makes it ugly. That's kind of what I read it as. But then obviously in the film that's like completely changed. Yeah, like obviously all of the kids have action with Lucy with a tiny dagger. Tiny. It's like, okay, what you're actually going to achieve with that? But sure, none of them have any.
I think it's a fun kind of the emphasis has changed. Like with the Hobbit, the Battle of Five Armies gets a whole film, and in the adaptation, that battle is like a massive deal. But I think both of them are actually quite anti-war pieces, and I think the refusal to give a huge amount of page time to the details of battle. And only giving us these very small but highly emotional snippets. Like, I mean, Peter's first kill, I think, is really, like, quite horrifying in the book. Yeah. Like, it's really, like,
it's not glorious.
It's chaotic, sort of it's gross, it smells, it's this whirl where he doesn't really, it's all too fast and he can't track what's going on. He feels sick, but he's got to do it anyway. There's this kind of... I don't know, it's not glorifying it, and it's not interested in it, except as a kind of, here is a thing that sometimes you have to do and it sucks. For your sister or for your Aslan or for the leprechaun or the centaur that's fighting beside you or whatever, sometimes you have to do this thing and it will be horrible and incomprehensible and disgusting. But that's it.
I guess the thing is like at the end of the day, like both of these books are written at a time to children whose parents would have fought in either one or both of World War I and World War II. Like you'd have that direct impact of like, if it wasn't your parents, it was somebody in your family. And I guess...
An awareness that it is not, in fact, Dolce et Decorum.
Yes, you kind of... the child is probably already very aware of the impacts of war, like even if it's subconscious through their unresolved trauma, like you're gonna.
But they'd see the wounded around. Like,
exactly.
I think that was very common.
These books are only published in the 50s, so it's not unreasonable to have a 10-year-old child a 10-year-old child who would have been born in like the late 40s or something like that, like their pet, like it directly impacts them. And so I guess like skipping over it in the books, it gives that it means it's still a kid's book. Like it's not the kids already know that war's not great. The kids already know it's not a nice experience, so we don't need to like bring it up again, and we don't need to like explicitly describe that on the page.
Oh, we don't need to labour the point.
Labour the point. That's the phrase I'm looking for. Yeah. Guys, I think we need to ask some more fun questions, and
I really want to know how this fictional Santa measures up to the other fictional Santas of which we have spoken in episodes past. How does this compare to the Hogfather? How does it compare to the Ghost of Christmas Present?
I mean, I'll always pick the Hogfather.
I kind of say, like, what if the Hogfather turned up? Like, the Hogfather's gone, Death's a replacement, while Santa's not there. Father Christmas, does that mean Death is also the replacement Father Christmas? For the interim period while the White Witch is there, he's like, shit, better get this done. He's like going around the Discworld and then going to Narnia, because I'm pretty sure it's Death not across all things. So like
the White Witch having to deal with Death being the Hogfather and being like, what on earth is happening? And Death just being like, my granddaughter has a poker.
Kid wanted a sword. What can I say? Kid wanted a sword, I gave them a sword. Like,
I tell you what, I do think, having now read this, I feel like that is, if it's not a direct reference, it's that's a fun resonance. The whole, I will give her a sword.
Yeah, I was like, she wanted a sword, so she can a sword. What is the problem with that?
Yeah,
I think my favourite Santa is Death as Santa. Like, yeah.
I think...
I've got a lot of time for the Ghost of Christmas Present, but I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I think the Ghost of Christmas Present kind of has a similar, like, this is a spirit of, like, cheer and jollity and stuff, but it's also, like, a fairly ancient and wise... This guy knows stuff, which is also the vibe that you get from the Santa. Who gives the best presents, do we think?
I think Hogfather. Death as the Hogfather.
Sword and a whole pony.
Because, like...
You just have to ask sincerely with love in your heart, and he'll do it.
And I think that's what children want at Christmas. They want, a
Here's
horse
the thing.
in the kitchen.
Which of these Santas could give you the death of Elon Musk for Christmas? Only one of them, and that's why he's the best. Can we publish that?
I tell you what,
does Ron need to bleep that?
I tell you what, I think
would be banned.
I tell you what, I think Narnia.
Just bleep out the name. It's fine.
I think Narnia Father Christmas wouldn't kill Elon Musk for you. He wouldn't give you his death as a present, but he would give you a sword and then point and then like look side-eye meaningfully in the direction of Elon Musk. Anyway.
Okay, can I just point out, we're recording this mid-November.
For context.
If anything happens to a certain person between now and when this episode airs, it was not us. I wish it were, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
We haven't voodooed it.
If he's killed with a sword, we're going to be in so much trouble.
Yeah.
Please,
okay, I want to know Gaslight Gatekeep Girl Boss. This is very important to me.
I mean, Edmund's gaslighting.
I mean, it's the witch, right, for all of them, isn't it? The witch.
She's a triple threat. We've got another triple threat, guys.
I thought Edmund's gaslight because he's gaslighting that he never went to Narnia.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Gatekeep.
It's not gaslighting. It's just lying. He's not trying to convince anyone that their own recollection is false.
Well, he is trying to convince Lucy that her own recollection is
false.
No,
he doesn't think he's going to convince her that she's wrong. He just wants to be a dick to her.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
But I think it does have an element of the kind of... I don't know, I think it's an edge case, because for me, one of the reasons that is so upsetting is because it's got an element of the... It's not that he's getting her to not believe, but he is discrediting her, and specifically in a way that makes her look mad.
Well, and her siblings start to think she's mad. Yeah, you know what? Fair enough.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think this is primo White Witch all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's gatekeeping the Turkish Delight. Obviously, she's a girl boss.
I think gatekeeping in this instance is the always winter, never Christmas. She's gatekeeping Christmas.
Oh my god.
And she's gatekeeping spring. She's like, nobody gets these. Nobody gets to have fun treats and parties except me, maybe. But there's no evidence that she actually does.
As a seasonally depressed bitch, I would be ineffective against her.
I don't know, do you not think... I'm kind of sitting here like, I would be angrier. Maybe I wouldn't have the get up and go to actually do anything about it. But if she was anywhere near me and I was anywhere near any kind of heavy object, you know, I could push my piano out of the... I couldn't push my piano out of the window. I could not do that. I am so old and decrepit. My piano's not even that heavy, but, like, it's not happening. Not even to kill the White Witch could I do this.
But the thing is, if you did, it would fall out of the window and land on her, and then it would be the Looney Tunes things where she had, like, piano keys for teeth. And that is very good.
Ah, that would be good. That would.
Yeah.
Do you think that works for digital pianos?
Yeah, you know what? It'd be like the episode of Supernatural where he gets piano falling on his head.
Oh, yeah.
Is that from the Heat of the Moment episode?
Well, I'm just throwing back
with
to
all the stupid. That's the second time in a couple of weeks that episode has come up. Are we in the SB Renaissance? Maybe.
Who do you think would be funniest in this book to put in a time loop of one of the... Get time looped, idiot. If we were going to get time looped, idiot, one of these characters.
Which, yes.
She just gets got every time and she can't understand why she keeps losing.
She's in the time loop where it's like, you know, to get out you have to be nice. and it's just her being a bitch for like 90 years.
She's like, I can't do it. I'm inherently evil. I am.
You know, one of those time loops that teaches you to be a better person. And she just never gets out.
She's stuck there. That's
because she's intrinsically evil, because she is not human, I guess.
Yeah.
This reminds me of a fanfic that I'm never going to write, an idea I had for Star Wars Phantom Menace, where it's Qui-Gon that gets time looped. And he's supposed, and every time, instead of like doing something sensible, he's like, well, this time I won't get got. And he gets got every single time and learns nothing from it. If we're talking about who's going to learn the most, it's probably Edmund. But I feel like the whole, like, one of the big things about this story that I think I still, even with my, you know, giving as much grace as possible, meeting it where it's at, trying not to be, you know, the horrible teenage atheist that secretly lives in my brain. The thing that still gets me is the kind of that sense in several places where there's nothing, their choices don't matter all that much. It's all about getting to Aslan and, you know, Aslan
they
will
aren't
fix
actually
it.
the doers here.
Yeah,
it's
they're
all
not,
Aslan.
you know, they're very much, I mean, like, I think it's, you know,
we
there's
put
stuff
Aslan
that they...
in the time loop. Can God create a time loop that even he cannot break himself out of?
Well, I guess there is the Emperor in this, who is the
Yes, the
God.
Emperor beyond the sea, yeah.
So,
yeah, because Aslan is Jesus, but the Emperor is God.
There's an even deeper magic that sometimes Aslan gets time looped for. But I think Edmund's the only one that's got something he could potentially learn from being time looped. But the structure of the story doesn't really, like,
doesn't really
allow
lend
it.
to that, does it?
They don't make significant choices, really.
One of the reasons he learns is because there are consequences, and the whole thing about the time loop is it's difficult for the consequences to stick.
Yeah.
Except in your conscience.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about, one of the things I thought when I was reading it was like, because of the whole, they make the point that the beavers say, oh, you can't go after your brother because you'll just die and then the prophecy won't be fulfilled. And, you know, the best thing you can do to keep him alive is to go to Aslan and he'll deal with it. But there's a lot of moments where Edmund could do something that would make absolutely no difference in the end, except that it matters that somebody stood up to you. And I feel like if you were going to play with him in a time loop, that's the thing that you'd want to poke. But yeah, you're right. It's only when he sees the squirrels and the people having a party and then getting turned to stone and he tries to stop it and can't.
Yeah, and he begins to really truly believe like that he's fucked up big time.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I like, thinking about this, is just the, like, forgiveness is such a big part of this book. And it's really like, no, you've said sorry and you've meant it. And we love you and we've forgiven you. And that's it. We're done now. We don't have to, we're not going to bring this up again. And that happens a bunch of different times. Like, I think Peter owns up to having done something a couple of times.
I'm sorry, I didn't believe you about Narnia. Can we shake on it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think with, when they first meet Aslan, he says, I think it's partly my fault that Edmund ran because I was mean to him. And, you know, I don't think he was that mean, but he owns it. He's like, if I hadn't been angry with him. It might
have been easier, yeah.
Or if we'd made up, like, maybe he would have stayed with us. And I think that's another thing, is that Edmund is on a knife's edge about being a dick basically every time. He's like, it could go either way. It's not that he's, like, always not even thinking about doing the right thing. There are multiple occasions
he does
where
have the magic Turkish Delight addiction.
He does. That's true. Then I think that makes the fact that every time he makes the decision to do wrong, it's like, portrayed as a very close run thing, I think is interesting in the context of the magic sweets.
Yeah.
Like, and also in the fact that he is able to come back.
She should have introduced him to Red Bull as well, you know? Then should really have
magic
Who's to say the magic drink wasn't Red Bull?
You know
that
what?
That is true. It doesn't say it doesn't. It doesn't say it doesn't.
Yeah.
Red Bull does
also,
give you
I'm
wings,
pretty sure Santa gives them booze at one point. There's definitely
the beaver gives them booze after they wake up in the set.
It's back to like the Victorian thing of like booze solves all problems. So
like just have a bit of brandy, like they do in Dracula, where it's just they're all absolutely wasted at all times on brandy.
It's like you're having a blood transfusion, brandy. Child wakes up from sleep, brandy.
That actually reminds me of one other thing I thought was really interesting, was the way that the Queen is described reminded me of Dracula actually. As
interesting.
She's very pale and then has a very red mouth, which is also how I think Dracula's described initially, which was kind of interesting to me. I have nowhere to go with that. It was just a thing I noticed that I thought was interesting.
Guys, what is our darling dear Gossamer's rating of this book? Because I'm scared we're going to run out of time if we don't discuss it.
There's betrayal. There's trolling. There is a very large cat.
Yes.
Right?
There's multiple very large cats.
Aslan is Kitty. He's a kitty boy.
It's true.
But I don't feel like it's not hijinksy enough. I feel like it's too nice. It's too goody two shoes English for her.
I think the kind of joy that you get from hanging out with Aslan and freeing statues from prison and things is not quite the same as the...
No, it's not the joy that she seeks. It's
not the sort of hijinks and shenanigans.
Nobody's a bitch in this book, like in a fun way.
True.
Nobody's like nobody's serving cunt. Nobody's a bitch. Like it's. I don't feel like it just doesn't have the vibes for high cat rating.
It's
the ingredients are there, but C.S. Lewis did not have the sauce.
It's not Temeraire, which is our 10 out of 10 cat rating.
I think we did. Did we give Gideon a 10 out of 10 as well?
Gideon and possibly Lyrael as well, because that does involve an actual cat.
That does have an actual cat, yeah.
So I think. So if that's 10, it's got the ingredients.
Do we think a lion is more like a cat than a dragon, or is a dragon?
No, the dragon was more like a cat. This lion is not like a Gothmog cat. It's not...
Again, like there's none of them are a bitch. Like Temeraire's a bitch. That's why we love him. Right?
Also, I'm now also thinking about the thumbs and capacity to sin thing. Because Gothmog does not have thumbs, but she does have claws and a capacity to sin. Aslan does not, as far as we're aware, have a capacity to sin or thumbs.
Well, he is Jesus, so like
this is okay. We're about to enter new realms of heresy. Can God sin?
Can God sin? Join us in
not does he, but can he?
Well, see, this is interesting because if we're getting into the Augustinian,
I can hear Rowan sighing psychically through time. As they look at the runtime of this episode, we have got to wrap it
guys,
up.
We still haven't got a rating.
We're going to do mini episodes.
I propose a 4.
Oh, I was going to say 5 because it's got.
I thought about a 5, and then I was like, yeah, maybe.
It's interesting because I think
go-
it's very, there's a lot of hedonism, but it's like dog hedonism.
Yeah. It's not cat vibes.
It's like the description of when they are riding on Aslan's back feels like a dog with its head stuck out the car window, you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I feel she'd get upset with that because she's like, they're riding on a large cat. Like,
people are not comfy. People aren't comfy cozy in this book.
no.
You know?
No, it's not cat vibes. It's not cat
No.
vibes. So are we saying 4 out of 10? I will write that on the document as the official score for this book.
All right.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, guys.
We do have to wrap it up. What are we reading next time?
What are we reading next time? You know what?
Don't ask me that question. I don't know shit.
I have the spreadsheet open. We're going back to the Discworld.
Yay! Back to Discworld. I am
boy.
so hyped. If you too are excited, or if you too have a book recommendation for us, we are collating them together to eventually circulate amongst on the blog. I can't do words. You can message us on our email or on the links on our website or via our socials. But thank you all so much for listening. Remember, if you did like this episode, it would mean the world to us if you gave it a like or a review. So say hello, send us a message and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, Merry Christmas, and we will see you next